Hello and welcome back to another lecture for your Building Technology 1 Building Materials. For today's lesson, we're going to be tackling about wood and stone. Now, I'd like to put it out there ulit na this is a live recording. Therefore, if I do stutter during my lecture, please bear with me, okay? Let's get right on to it. We have wood. What are the advantages of wood as a construction or as a building material? Firstly, it is lightweight. Magaan. This is in comparison, of course, to other building materials such as steel, metal, steel is metal, and other building construction materials. It's renewable, recyclable, and natural because you can replant and it grows naturally. Natural resistance to electrical conduction, which means hindi siya kayang daanan ng kuryente, therefore in a way making it safe. It's sound absorptive, as in nag-absorb ng sound, which is also a concern for us designers in terms of acoustics. And of course, one of the most important things that we should consider is the aesthetic. It's naturally beautiful when we use strength. When we use wood. Simply put, one also of the advantages of wood is that in terms of tensile strength, it can support its own weight better than metals, for example. What are the disadvantages naman? So, number one, even if ang advantage niya is hindi siya conduit ng electricity, it therefore makes it flammable. And it's also susceptible to rot and insect damage. And it has size irregularities. What do I mean by that? Because it is a naturally produced item, it is therefore cut into size by machines and all that. Therefore, meron at merong tapon. At meron at merong hindi pantay or hindi true to size na production na napoproduce na napupunta sa atin. Therefore, there are size irregularities, which is one disadvantage but can also be taken as advantage in a sense na, kunwari, gusto mo ng medyo mas natural na design. So, yung irregularity ng wood mo can also be an advantage, di ba? Now, before we move on with other things about wood, I'd like to break down lang the difference between fire retardant and fire resistant because these are things that can happen most specifically to wooden materials. Fire retardant makes combustible materials difficult to ignite. So yung wood, for example, taking into consideration wood, when you say it's a fire retardant wood, it makes combustible materials difficult to ignite. It slows the ignition from the word retardant. It slows the ignition, burning, or makes the flame self-extinguish. Therefore, in a sense, hindi siya umaapoy. Fire retardant yung material, meaning mabagal, pinapabagal nung chemical na yon. Therefore, in a sense, combustible pa rin yung material, pero mabagal yung pag-combust ng material because it's fire retardant. So, it slows the ignition burning. And sometimes it makes the flame self-extinguish, as in since slow nga yung process of creating the flame, nagse-self-extinguish siya, nawawala yung apoy. So that's fire retardant. When you say fire resistant, the material itself is non-combustible. Ibig sabihin hindi siya talaga combustible. The material has a barrier against fire. So that's fire resistant. Now, there are fire resistant ratings na makikita nyo that says 30, 60, 90 minutes, which denotes how long it takes for the paint or yung chemical to fail para mawala yung coating na yun for the fire to go through the door, for example, or through the material. So, for example, yung fire exit doors nyo, those are fire-resistant doors. Now, pag ang rating niya is 90 minutes, after 90 minutes, the fire will start creeping through the door. Hindi magko-combust yung door, hindi mag-aapoy, although tatagos yung apoy papunta sa kabilang material. Ngayon, if yung kabilang material or yung kadikit na material na yun is combustible, then dun kakalat yung apoy. Fire-resistant materials have char, smolder, and ignite with difficulty. It Fire-resistant materials continue to burn or smolder in the presence of flame. So ayun siya. Um, they only burn or smolder but they do not ignite, they do not combust. Gets ba? Okay, sana gets. Now, moving on, now that we've tackled that, wood construction materials can be classified into two categories. We have your natural wood and your engineered wood. Natural wood comprises of, in a general sense lang, your hardwoods and softwood. While engineered woods, some of the most popular ones are plywood, blockboard, veneers, laminates, and particle boards, and your MDF and HDF, which we will discuss later on. So, engineered woods are composite wood, man-made wood, or manufactured board. So, those are other terms for your engineered wood. Himayin natin, let's start with your natural wood classification. Your hardwood versus your softwood. Your hardwood is denser because it takes more time to form or to mature than your softwood. Therefore, hardwood is denser. And as you can see, ang nakalagay dyan, usually softer yung softwood because hindi lahat ng softwood mas malambot than the hardwood. So don't be confused sa part na yon. There are some softwood na harder than hardwood. The difference is that hardwood is denser than softwood. Hardwood is usually darker in color. Again, keyword usually, hindi lahat, pero most. And softwoods are almost always light. Hardwood, as I've mentioned, has a slower growth rate, therefore developing more rings and therefore becoming denser. While softwood has loose grain. Grain sa wood, ibig sabihin yung parang texture niya, yung pattern na wavy-wavy. Sa softwood, mas malalaki yung spacing nun. Sa hardwood, mas dense, mas intact, mas compact, mas dikit-dikit yung mga linya. Hardwood has higher compressive and tensile strength compared to that of softwood. And yun nga, close grain for hardwood. Now, dun sa softwood, nakalagay dyan is higher sap, meaning softwood has higher moisture content. When we say a higher moisture content, mas mamasa-masa siya. Therefore, it has higher permeability. As opposed to hardwood na lower ang sap, therefore lower permeability or yung capacity of water or other materials to pass through the wood. Another distinguishing difference between hardwood and softwood, medyo technical na siya, but ito yung pinaka-essence kung bakit sila naka-classify as hardwood and softwood. Hardwood are basically angiosperms. So from three classifications, they're angiosperms. They are seed-producing flowering plants. Their seed is enclosed inside an ovary or usually in a fruit. Tapos nai-scatter or nai-scatter yung seeds na yan through the help of animals. So that's hardwood classification. For the softwood, this is under the classification of gymnosperms. Gymnosperms are also seed producing, but they are non-flowering plants. So hardwood are flowering plants, softwood is non-flowering plants. Their seeds are bare and not enclosed, which are found on scales, leaves, or as cones, And usually, wind lang ang kailangan for the seeds to scatter. So the image to your lower right, ang left na image po is a sample of your hardwood. As you can see, tighter, denser yung grain niya, making it usually darker in color kasi mas maraming rings. And then softwood has a loose grain or mas kitang-kita mo yung rings kasi mas malaki yung spacing niya. So that's the basic rundown difference of your hardwood and your softwood. Now, another term you should be familiar with in terms of wood is what we call seasoning. Wood seasoning in specific terms. So, wood seasoning is the process of removing the moisture content from wood to minimize structural problems when used in construction, sorry. The first and foremost rule ng paggamit ng kahoy is dapat hindi siya basa. Yan ang pinakakalaban ng kahoy, even when you use it na as a finish, is tubig. Therefore, seasoning is a process that removes the moisture before it is said to be fit for construction use. Now, I've identified seasoning processes listed below. These are only some of the most used and common ones. So you have kiln drying, air drying, solar drying, and chemical seasoning. Okay, so these are the graphs. The upper left one is your kiln drying. Ang hirap sabihin. Kiln drying method of food seasoning. So from the word itself, kiln, ibig sabihin yan oven. So niluluto yung kahoy. In a sense, yun ang general na definition niya. Niluluto yung kahoy sa isang malaking structure na parang oven ang gamit niya. Pumapasok yung heat, lumalabas yung hot air. Ganun lang siya. Okay, the upper right diagram is your solar drying method. So as you can see sa left niya, merong solar collector panels. And naka-enclose yung structure and then nandun nakastack yung wood sa loob ng structure para mag-dry siya. It's a mixture of air and solar solar energy. Ayan, solar drying. The lower left image is what's that? Your chemical seasoning. So binababad siya, minamarinate yung kahoy with chemicals to treat it, to make it, to lose its moisture content, to make it protected against water. And then the lower right diagram is your air drying seasoning. So, air drying, literal, pinapatuyo lang sa hangin, tapos may counterweights sa ibabaw. Sorry, not counterweights, may weights sa ibabaw para hindi maulanan. Yun. Those are your wood seasoning processes. Now, very vague lang in terms of definitions kasi just get the idea of it. As long as you get the idea of it, ang hirap din kasi parang ang hirap niyang i-grasp if hindi mo pa na-try mag-construction. So, daanan lang natin in general para lang alam nyo kung ano ang pwedeng gawin. I mean, kung ano ang pwedeng i-expect. Pero let's not delve into details because as long as you understand the principle, then that's good. Okay, moving on from our natural wood, we have your engineered wood as mentioned kanina. Engineered wood is manufactured by binding or fixing strands of wood. The first one I mentioned kanina is the most common, most sikat na engineered wood, your plywood. Plywood is created from thin layers or what we call plies of wood veneer glued together. So as you can see sa image, it's not one whole block of kahoy. It is strips of kahoy, plies of kahoy. So kaya siya tinawag na plywood. Now, a sister kind of engineered wood of plywood is what we call the blockboard. Hindi blockboard na pang school, block as in bloke. It's made up of a core of softwood strips glued together. So, kung kanina yung plywood made of plies, ito block literal or strips glued together. Kita nyo naman yung difference sa itsura nila. So, yung plywood layers, yung blockboard blocks. Lower right image shows you a more clear or in-depth definition ng block. So, you have parang Jenga. Block 1, block 2, and then 3 and 4. And then for the upper left image, you have your block 1, ganyan. The next kind of engineered wood that we will discuss would be your veneer. Veneer, simply put is the thin slices of wood glued together into core panels. Ang veneer ay peeling. Parang ang process niya is peeling the trunk of the tree. And it's usually thinner than 3 mm, if I'm not mistaken. It's usually thinner than 3 mm. That's your veneer. The laminate, your laminate, however, is a thin sheet of material used to cover the core of a wood project to change the appearance of the material. It usually involves, the difference with veneer is that it usually involves plastics or composites. So, may additive na siya. Kita nyo yung upper right image. When we design projects and then usually, pag naghahanap kayo ng laminate, bibigyan kayo ng swatch na ganyan. So, pipiliin nyo lang mismo yung swatch na manipis and then sila nang bahalang mag-laminate dun sa backing, dun sa core mismo, as you can see sa lower right na image. So, that's your laminate and your veneer. The next kind of of engineered wood is your particle board. It's also known as chipboard. I'm sure you've heard this. Chipboard because it came from wood chips, shavings, resin, and binders. So, mga scrap, mga tira-tira, mga kuskus, ayan. This is the material usually used for yung mga cheapo na ready to assemble na furniture. So if it's not made from MDF, which I will discuss after, it's usually made from particle board. The problem with this is that after a few years, since wala siyang structural element component masyado except for the binders. Since shavings lang siya, nagwa-warp, nagbe-bend siya over time. And hindi mo siya mapipigilan, lalo na pag nabasa siya, na mag-warp more because kuskus nga lang yung laman niya. So, that's your particle board or chipboard. Medyo na may mistaken ang particle board minsan with your MDF or your HDF board. MDF as in medium density fiber board. The image to your right shows the difference between an MDF and a particle board or a chipboard. Your MDF is made by breaking down natural wood residuals into fiber, combining it with wax, resin binder, and undergoes the process of putting temperature and pressure. So, ang nasa taas na layer ng image is the MDF and yung nasa baba is your chipboard or your fiberboard. Kita niyo yung difference? Finer and more pressured intact, more, ang tawag dito, more dense ang ating MDF or HDF compared to that of the chipboard, which is why it is cheaper. So, MDF, HDF basically has very minimal differences kasi from each other kasi they undergo the same process. But HDF is better for building heavy furniture that you use regularly. HDF board for cabinets, ganyan, more than MDF boards because the wear and tear is better. Ang pag-hold up ng wear and tear ng HDF is better than the MDF. But in terms of how it is produced, there's no noticeable I mean, there's no technicality in terms of difference. So that's MDF and HDF, and the difference of those two between your chipboard or your particle board. That's basically it for your wood section of the lecture. Now we go to the stone section of the lecture. Stone as building material. How do we classify a good building stone? We classify a good building stone by looking at its crushing strength, its appearance, of course, as architects, its durability, its hardness, the percentage wear, the resistance to fire, texture, toughness index, and is it low water absorption. Now, similar to wood seasoning, ang tawag naman po sa pag-treat o pag-customize, pag-ayos ng bato ay dressing. So, sa wood, it's seasoning. Sa stone, it's dressing. Dressing stone is the process of giving a proper size, shape, and finish to the roughly broken stones when obtained from mining or quarrying. So, dressing, inaayos, pinapaganda. Okay? Ang pinaka ang hilig ko magpinaka. Ang pinaka-component lang ng lecture sa stone, ng lecture natin in terms of stone, is kung saan lang siya ginagamit. So, I think stone is basically used nowadays for masonry. Let's first define masonry. Masonry is the building of structures from individual units, which are often laid in and bound together by mortar. And the term masonry can also refer to the unit of the unit themselves. Therefore, kunwari, CHP, that's a masonry unit. The masonry is the mixing of the masonry unit with the mortar. Now, based on the arrangement and degree of refinement, this masonry is classified, can be classified into either rubble masonry or ashlar masonry. Now, why are we discussing masonry agad-agad? Hindi pa nga natin na-discuss yung uses of stone or in terms of it as a building material. Now, you should note that stone is used two ways. First, as part of the structure, katulad ng dati, for foundations, walls, columns, lintels, arches during the Roman and Greek era, ganyan. And facework, or to give appearance to the structure. Now, we will focus this time on facework or the appearance of the structure, less on the structural element or capability of stone, because meron na tayong bakal eh. May reinforced column, RC na tayo eh. Meron na tayong konkreto. Therefore, we do not rely solely on stones na. Okay? So, moving on, you have your rubble masonry. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. There are 6 types of rubble masonry. So, you can see from the diagrams, you have your uncoarse rubble masonry. As in uncoarse, the weak corners and edges are removed with mason's hammer. Stone blocks are employed. Kita nyo naman sa diagram, it's a random rubble put in place together to create a facework and a wall na conducive. It's basically making the pieces fit each other. It's the cheapest, it's the roughest, and purest form. So, keywords lang tayo. Okay? Then you have your uncoarse squared rubble. Ang difference lang niya, generally, the stones are square and hammer dressed na siya, as in na-dress na yung stone. As I mentioned kanina, the dressing stone, inaayos na or naka-shape na yung, naka-flatten na yung face niya. Built to regular course, in this type of stone masonry, the uniform height stones are used in horizontal layers. Ang pinaka closest na application nito ngayon would be your brick wall. So, built to regular course from the word itself, regular. And your polygonal rubble masonry. Yung building application niya, for example, is yung nasa left na image. Kita nyo naman, um, in this type of masonry, the stones are roughly dressed to an irregular polygonal shape. Ayan. The inferior type and the superior type. But basically, it's just dressing the face work of your building to have various shapes and then get sorry dressing the face of your building to have various polygonal shapes and then yung edging niya would have regular shapes. So yun lang yun, polygonal rubble masonry. Your flint rubble masonry is a type of masonry used in the areas where the flint is available in plenty. Now, ang flint stones po ay yung medyo mamilog-milog pero classified pa rin as polygonal na kind ng stone. This is a general definition na. So, wag nyo masyadong effortan ito. These are only the type of masonry finish na common para lang you have an idea of how you can employ face work when using stone. But there are a lot of stones na ready-made na ididikit mo na lang eh, which we will discuss later on. Also called engineered stone. So, para lang familiar kayo with the types of masonry. Okay? And then you have the ashlar masonry. This is built if your anong tawag kanina? If your rubble masonry is made with usually semi-dressed to undressed stone, your ashlar masonry is made from accurately dressed stones with uniform and fine joints. These are the examples of your ashlar masonry. Ashlar fine, ashlar rough, ashlar rock or quarry face, block in course facing, and you have your chamfered, sorry. So, ang difference niya with ashlar and the rubble is, rubble, when you say rubble is mga naguho, mga natanggal. Therefore, it's irregular in a way. When you say ashlar, dress na yung stone niya. So, that's your rubble masonry and your ashlar masonry. See, I don't know why dinaanan ko pa isa-isa yung rubble masonry when I can just say their main difference is that dressed yung ashlar and then undressed stone yung rubble. Kasi nga rubble. Okay? Move on tayo. Next slide. This is actually the last slide for this lecture. I just want to mention na similarly from wood, you also have artificial stone, which can also be called engineered stone. It's a composite material made of crushed stone bound together by an adhesive, which is very similar to your engineered wood. These as adhesive is usually commonly polymer resin with some newer versions using cement mix. Your left image shows a natural stone. Your right image shows an engineered stone or an artificial stone. Now, don't get me wrong, merong artificial or engineered wood na kamukha na ng natural grain ng natural na stone. Similar sa left. But for purposes of discussion, usually when you see a stone that has texture like this, yung sa right, it's usually engineered stone. Okay? If hindi natural yung takbo ng grain niya, ng pattern niya, it's artificial stone. Apart from these kinds of stones, engineered stone na nakikita nyo usually on countertops, we also have engineered stones na ginagamit for facework, for brickwork, ganyan. Brick is natural, it's mud usually, and kiln dried or oven baked, pugon baked. But there are also versions of masonry stones na artificial. So, that would be an additional reading for you na lang, but I will not discuss that further on because it has very minimal importance. The main goal for this lecture is for you to be familiar and bakit nga ba may advantage and disadvantage yung wood at saka stone. So that's basically it for today's lecture, this week's lecture. I will be posting your activity after I post this video. And again, I am not strict with my lectures because I know na we're doing distance learning. Therefore, if you want to learn, you will learn. If you don't want to learn, then I can't help you with that. But my job is to help you learn. So if you don't want to learn, then hindi ko kayo matutulungan doon. Okay? I hope you enjoyed the discussion. And just let me know if you have questions or merong part na malinaw. I try to make my lectures as straight to the point and as concise as I can. But if I do miss out on something or tingin nyo merong unclear sa inyo, please do just let me know, okay? Ayun, yun lang. Thank you very much for listening, for bearing with me. I hope you have a great week, and stand by na lang for the activity, okay? Thank you!